Translation theory. Are there different ways to translate? Which one is best? So there's going to be different theories. Which one is best? Why do we buy into which approach? Do translators ever make mistakes? Let's just first put it up front. Do translators ever make mistakes? Who's uses King James Version here? Is there a King James person? Okay, here's a mistake in your King James Version. Now you say, Hildebrandt, you're coming off really strong. This is a mistake. Okay, it's wrong. Okay. Now, by the way, do I have a great deal of respect for the King James Version? Yes. Okay. But question, is it perfect? And the answer is no. Here's an example. In Proverbs chapter 26, verse 23, it says in the King James Version, KJV, King James Version, burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd. Do you know what a potsherd is? In Israel, they make these pots out of clay pots. And what happens to clay pots after a period of time? Clay pots always get what? Busted. And so you've got these sherds of pots that are busted. So potsherd is a busted pot piece. So with burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd, a piece of pottery, covered with silver dross. Silver dross. What is silver dross? We don't do that. When you want to purify a metal, what do you do with it? Gold or silver, what do? Do you put it in a fire and then kind of bubble it and melt it down, and then all the crud rises to the top? And then what do you do with the stuff that's on the top? You skim off all the crud that's on the top and you take it off, and does that purify your metal? Is it possible you have to do the process many times and keep scraping the bad stuff off and things? So silver dross. Why would you put silver dross? Is silver dross the bad stuff? It's the bad stuff that you skim off the silver, you put that on a pot. Does that sound just a little bit odd that you'd put silver dross on a pot? It sounds a little bit odd. The King James translators, first of all, when did they translate? 1611. What was going on in the world in 1611? About 1620, what was happening in America? There's a guy named William Bradford. Does anyone remember William Bradford on Plymouth Plantation coming over and boom, 1620. So we're talking 9 years within the King James translators. By the way, when Plymouth Plantation, is that a long time ago? Okay? And he sails over to America, William Bradford, 9 years within the King James Version. So this is old. And the King James translators, were they all experts in Hebrew? Yes, many of the translators were experts in Hebrew. Question, did they know everything about Hebrew? No. The King James translators tell us in the introduction, they tell us explicitly, they said, we didn't know Hebrew, some of the Hebrew words. This word silver dross is only used one time in the Bible. What's the problem with that? Meaning is determined by what? What determines meaning? I've said it about 50 times at least. What determines the meaning of a word? Context. What's the problem when the word is only used one time? What's the problem with that? Do you have trouble establishing the context? This word is only used one time. So the King James translators, they went to some Jewish people and they said, what does this word mean? And some of the Jewish people said, well, it means this. They went to other Jewish people. What does it mean? They told them something totally different. And they ended up with all these different meanings. And basically the Jewish people, what was their answer for what this word meant? They didn't know either, okay? That's the honest truth. And the King James translators point that out. We did the best we could. We looked in our best dictionaries. We checked with our best people. Nobody knew really what some of these words were. These Hebrew words are rare words. Now you say, Hildebrandt, how do you know that's wrong? Well, once upon a time, just north of Israel, if this is Israel, just north of Israel, 50, 60, 70 miles, there's a place called Ugarit. It's up in Lebanon, Ugarit. They found this place called Ugarit. There's a language called Ugaritic, okay? I've had the unfortunate privilege of having to learn Ugaritic, okay? They found like 20,000 of these tablets, okay? These tablets from Ugaritic. They date from about 1200 BC. Ugaritic is a sister language to Hebrew. Is that very helpful? If you know Spanish, can you fake some Portuguese? Okay? I took a whole year of Ugaritic, and some of these times having this on tape really bothers me, because my professor will probably get on my case, but I took a year's worth of Ugaritic, and the honest truth is, I faked the year. I read the Ugaritic just like it was Hebrew. In other words, I knew Hebrew, so what I did was I took the Ugaritic, and when I read the Ugaritic, I just read it like it was Hebrew. And I read the whole year that way. And at the end of the year, then I went to the professor just as kind of a joke because I got a good grade in the class and stuff. And I said, basically, I told him, I said, I just read it like it was Hebrew and stuff. And he said, yeah, because they're sister languages. There's so many of the words are very similar. And so I was able to get away with a year of it like that. Now, let me go back here. Guess what word pops up in the Ugaritic text? This very word, this silver dross word, which we don't know from Hebrew, occurs in Ugaritic. And what it means is, and I'm not sure whether I've got the, do I have the translation down here? No, I don't. What it means is, what do you put on a pot? Normally on a pot, you put a glaze on it, right? A glaze. The word that we found from Ugaritic that's used here means that the potsherd has a glazing on it. It's a glaze, it's glaze, that's all it is a glaze, okay? Now, by the way, does that make sense in this context, that it's glaze? Yeah, that's what you put on pots. And what he's saying is, you got fervent words with an evil heart. It's like glaze on a mud pot. You see that? The glaze is all pretty, but it's on a mud pot. Fervent words with an evil heart is like glaze, pretty nice glaze on a mud pot. So that's this word we now know. We now know what this is. You say, well, the King James translates, they should have known better. Why couldn't they have known better? Because Ugarit was only found in 1948, and it was frankly into the 50s and 60s before anybody could even translate this stuff very well. So what I'm suggesting is the King James translator, there is no way they could know what that word meant. We've only found that in the last 50 years. Does that make sense? So were the King James translators evil? No, they did the best they could with 1611. That things were very different back then, and we know, to be honest with you, we know much better now. So that's one reason for a movement away from the King James, is we know better now what some of these words mean, because we have some of these cognate languages that help us to understand what it is, okay? So now here's another one. Has the English language changed? In the last 300 years, has the English language changed? And here's 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 says this, we do you to wit of the grace of God. Now I ask you, have you done anybody to wit lately? Said, man, I got done to wit, but have you done anybody to wit? Okay. Do we talk like this? I do you to wit. When was the last time you said, I do you to wit? Okay. Now, and then the next question you say is, what in the world is this talking about? I do you to wit. What in the world does that mean? How about if I translate it like this? I want you to think about the grace of God. I want you to think about the grace of God. Does that make good sense? I want you to think. Do you to wit means I want you to think. Your wit. Do you know what wit? Okay, wit. Is anybody witty in here? Okay. Somebody's shaking their head. Okay, I like witty people. You can give me grief with it and stuff because I enjoy arguing with it and stuff, but witty. I do you to wit. In other words, I want you to think about the grace of God. I want you to think about the grace of God. I do you to wit. Now, by the way, should we probably translate this differently today than it was translated 300 years ago? Because we don't do many people to wit anymore. Okay, but we want people to think, and so we do the, I want you to think about. So the English language has changed.